One way for me to engage with my own script is the desire to shoot it. There should never be a scene in my scripts I would not be interested in shooting and having the pleasure of shooting. And I think the genre aspects of the film, they come not only with the development of the story itself, but maybe with the way I see films and the way I see life in my country, Brazil. And I think it's probably connected to the way the frame is set up sometimes. Sometimes you're supposed to frame it like this, and sometimes if you bring the camera to a little bit to the left, now there is a certain feeling of an uneasy feeling in the shot, which might suggest a genre. But I don't know. I think it comes with the development of the film itself. It's just a style, I guess. The opening sequence, for example, is something that I had in mind for many, many, many years, since the 1990s. I had this idea to shoot in a very kind of isolated gas station. I come from a city which is very irreverent and politically to the left. And it's a city that developed an urban legend called the hairy leg. My mother read it to me over breakfast when I was, a little kid. Just like Teresa Vittoria reads from the newspaper in the film. That's her, that's my mom reading it for me. And that came out not in the literary section, but it came out in the city section, in the police section of the newspaper. So the mixture of reality and fantasy can be incredibly real in a real life situation, and I just put it in the film. Of course, I had the desire to do stop motion in this film, and some people working in the film says, "What's this budget for stop motion? What scene is it? Oh, it's the hairy leg. All right, the hairy leg. That should work."
Pode ficar tranquilo que sua cliente é bem atendida aqui. Não tem nada a ver com isso. Viu? Sim. É isso mesmo. Vamos ter como afastar só um pouquinho pra gente.
I think I identified in Wagner not only a great actor, but a great person I wanted to be with. So I basically sat down and wrote a script that I would find it would be impossible for him to refuse. I told him this. I'm writing on something, I will make you an offer you can't refuse, like in The Godfather, And I wrote for 2 years, and I finally looked at the script and said, I think Wagner should read this. And sure enough, he really loved the script, and then we worked together to make the film happen. He, as an artist, he suffered many attacks from the far right, the way I did too. So we kind of called each other. We were on the phone, sharing our, grief. And all of that, I think, is part of the film. In some way, it is part of the logic of the film. In a situation like the one we went through during those years, the last 10 years in Brazil, it really felt like no good deed will go unpunished, because I had basically just done films, my films became prestigious, and that's when people get mad, they see that I'm well respected in other countries, and it really makes them mad because they have a daily struggle against reality. That's what the problem is. And Wagner, he directed a film himself called Marighella, which was very kind of cynically shelved and very cynically unofficially censored, because there is no official censorship in Brazil. But there are ways you can sabotage a project or a film. I think when I'm writing a script, I begin to realize that the script is going to a certain place. For example, the film can be quite brutal sometimes, this film. So I did not want this film to be just bleak all the way through. And it very naturally it came to me that I really wanted to be with a number of characters, and they really represent, you know, love, affection, which is something that happens in situations of hardship in society. You know, Brazil has just gone through a pretty horrible time with the former president. Where many of the words and a lot of the behavior from the military regime just came back. It really felt like they raided the museum of terrible ideas and brought them all back in the last 10, 15 years. So I really felt a lot of love in my heart, that's the truth, you know, for all those characters, because they are so amazing. And I think there is one important sequence when they have this long conversation in a group. And I think that's the real meaning of living in a dictatorship, is not being able to say who you are. So you have to find ways to hide and maybe use a different name or pretend you're somebody else. And I think that's the real scene related to dictatorship. And I remember that feeling when I was a little kid. You know, people would lower their voices suddenly, even if it didn't make sense because there was no one listening, but they would lower their voices depending on the subject being discussed, you know. And yeah, I think it felt like a countermeasure to some of the more brutal aspects of the film. So I think films, books, novels, they should have good dynamics, you know. You should go all the way up and all the way down, and almost like an opera, you know. Very quiet and very noisy. Our life is a geographic landscape, and we have these landmarks, which is, you know, books and cinema and music. And my life has all these landmarks, which is basically cinema. And the 1970s was a very strong year for cinema as a the popular experience of cinema. And Jaws, of course, was a massive phenomenon in the whole world. In Recife, also in Recife, which is a beach city, and we have our own shark problem. We have a real shark problem. So putting all these things together, I came up with what you see in the film, references to films, and then the hairy leg ends up in the shark's belly, and then the cinema becomes a place where people meet to discuss somebody's life and somebody's death.